things that has always puzzled me is Christians with a lack of joy. Christians who just, at the best, seem to be able to get through the motions. They just don't seem to see God's hand in anything. That's something that is kind of a hard thing for us to imagine, but that is the way that it works. Sometimes people just don't see what God has in store for them, and just caused me to wonder, especially since there's a scripture that probably everybody who is a Christian has memorized. Because it's so common and so memorized, but I wonder why it doesn't seem to bring that comfort and joy to Christians. That verse is the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I'm not going to go through this verse by verse and deal with all the things, but I think at even the most superficial reading, we get this idea that David is saying we should be comforted. We should be happy. We should be secure. And when you look at the thing that says, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me, in the context of being a shepherd taking care of the sheep, English, he's saying, you got a big stick that's going to knock down anybody that tries to hurt me. That's what he's saying. And so why do so many people walk through their Christian lives as almost like zombies? They just have no joy. They just don't. And so I have to sit there and say, well, since everybody knows this, how come it's not working for them? What is the problem? Well, maybe it's because, well, that's just not for me. That's for David. God really loved David a lot. Well, turn to Acts 10 and verse 34. 10th chapter of Acts. particular, for some reason, my Kindle got stuck on going to the dictionary and wouldn't go to the verse. I had to figure out how to get it back where it was supposed to. So Peter opened his mouth and said, "Truly, I understand that God shows no partiality." Now, it's not just for David. You know, but David, he's just so much better than me. Surely there's got to be some partiality. Turn now to Matthew 11:11. Truly, I say to you, among those born of women, there has arisen no one greater than John the Baptist. Yet the one who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. You know, we put David on a pretty high pedestal, right? Jesus himself said that John the Baptist, out of all the people who've been born out of women, and that's all the people ever, including David, he's the greatest. And then he said something that ought to give us tremendous comfort and joy. He said, "Yet the one who is the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." You might be the least in the kingdom of heaven as a Christian, but you are greater than John the Baptist, which makes you greater than David. So certainly, the 23rd Psalm applies to you, and it applies to me. Everybody that loves God has God's care over them. So why do Christians not see or feel God's care for them? Well, the first thing is troublesome times. But I want to ask you a question. Was David's life all sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows? No. And yet he's the one that wrote the 23rd Psalm. He went through some terrible times. But he knew, he believed that the bad times were temporary and they would be overshadowed by the good. He believed that, but I like to think he knew that. You know, there comes a point when you truly believe that belief becomes knowledge. When you are so sure of something that it is no longer what you believe, it is something that you know. And that's what Christians need to have, is that kind of a belief. He knew that the bad times would be overshadowed by the good. Do you believe in God's ability and His will for Him to apply the 23rd Psalm to you? Do you know that He's good shepherd. That he is leading you to the safe places to drink. That he's giving you a feast even though your enemies are all around you. That he's carrying a big stick to protect you. Do you believe that? Do you know that? Now, our second thing that I thought of is, what are you looking for? You know, we take the scripture that says, seek and you shall find, as only religious, but the fact is, that is a universal truth. You're going to find what you're looking for. That is just something that you just cannot get around. You'll find what you look for if you're focusing on the bad. You will steal away your peace and your joy when you focus on all those terrible things that happen. And they do happen. But you can't focus on them. You've got to look for the good. David could have focused on his troubles. His other psalms show that he had some terrible times. But even at the worst of those, he looked for God to bring him through. You got to focus on the finish line. Now, I want to tell you one of the problems that cops have. Cops have a real problem dealing with people in social situations. Because they spend 8 hours a day looking to see who might shoot them. Looking to see who's a child molester in disguise. Looking to see who's a thief. They always have to look to see the bad. So they have a real trouble relating to people because they have spent such a time focusing. So they have to truly shift gears when they go home to keep from being miserable people. Now, it was easier for those of us who were correctional officers because the people that we had to look at to make sure they didn't stab us, to see if they were telling the truth, all wore different clothes than us. But a street cop doesn't have that thing. He knows that bad lurks everywhere. So he has to constantly look for the good. He has to make a mind shift. We Christians need to have that mind shift. We need to make sure we're not like that kind. We have to look for the good. And you know, that really shouldn't be that bad. It shouldn't be that hard. I want you to think back when you were about 8 to 10, and it's a week before Christmas. Now, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I have a sneaking suspicion that more than one or two of you went hunting through the house to find your Christmas presents. I have a sneaking suspicion some of you would sneak down once they were under the tree and would unwrap them and then re-wrap them. Now, you know, maybe not. But my cousins and I did. I know you cannot imagine Glenda sneaking down and looking at presents, but I can tell you yes. That's a fact. It happened. Well, why did we do that? Because we knew there were good things waiting for us, and we just could not help but look for them. So why in our Christian lives don't we do that? Why don't we realize God has all these presents out there for us, and He didn't say don't look for them. He said look for them. And yet so many times we don't. The third thing is we need to focus on what God's hedge keeps out rather than what trickles through. God has a hedge around His Christians. He had a hedge around David. That didn't keep out all the trouble. But David had to focus on the things that God prevented from happening rather than what happened. At the very worst time in your life, if you sit down and you truly look at it, you can see that it could have been so much worse. So much worse. But God's hedge protected you. Don't focus on what trickles in. Focus on the fact that it didn't. How many of you drove here today and didn't get in an accident? All of you. Are there many, many people all over this country who got in an accident today? Some of them just got banged up. Some of them died. You didn't sleep in a tent last night. I think that if most of us were forced to live in our grandparents' house the way it was when they lived in it, we would throw it. We don't see the things that God has protected us from. Can you imagine? Can you imagine a person? You see him and he comes up to you and he's not wearing his bulletproof vest, even though the requirement is that he wears one. And you go, why aren't you wearing your vest? He goes, I wore it once, I got shot and I got a bruise. Well, I'm not wearing it anymore. Focusing on what trickles through rather than what it stops is dangerous. My car has airbags. It not only has airbags in the steering wheel, it's got airbags everywhere. They go crazy on those now. Debbie and I were in an accident. A pizza delivery guy turned right in front of us and there was not a thing we could do. We hit him. We got out of the car. Debbie is sitting on the curb by the side of the road. She's looking at her hands and she goes, I burn. I'm burning. I don't know what. I just can't. The stuff that makes an airbag go out is extremely hot and extremely costly. That's why cops know who was actually driving if you switch, because one of you's drunk, because one of you's going to have burns on their arm. Hate to tell you that, but you can't get away by switching anymore. but we still drive a car with airbags. Because what that airbag prevented was greater than what it didn't. That's important for us to understand that Psalms 23 is for us. We should have comfort and joy and security, knowing that God has a big stick walking beside us to take care of us. I was thinking this morning, we were coming to church and we were listening to a song, and the song comes from Psalm 125:2. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people. Why should we not be joyful? The Lord surrounds us. Turn to Philippians 4:4. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. And then switch down to verses 8 and 9. And this is the key in a nutshell. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. I hate to tell you, but that's a command. I'd like to say, we really should just focus on the good things and that. No, it's a command. He said, finally, notice, to sum it all up, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just. He even gets down to, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about those things. Sometimes there's not a whole lot excellent going on. Sometimes there's not a whole lot worthy of praise. But there's always something. Think on these things. The reason I brought that up is not because I hate seeing Christians who run around with a sad face like Grandpa's old mule, even though I do. But it's, let me tell you what happens. Every one of those people that I have seen that goes around and does not see himself surrounded by the Lord, does not see the Lord as his shepherd and the comfort and the joy that comes from it, every one of those leaves. If you don't get the comfort of the Lord, you're going to leave it. It's there. You just have to open your eyes. If anybody needs to answer the invitation of public way, you can come now as we stand.